Today, we're talking about a man who was an abolitionist, a community organizer, and a revolutionary leader. And he did all of that before the United States was even, officially a country. His name was Prince Hall. And his story, well, it's a huge but often forgotten piece of American history. So let's get into it.
I mean, just look at this quote. Historian Sidney Kaplan called him the first Black organizer in American history. That is a powerful statement. And this isn't just about Freemasonry. It's about a man who knew that if you want justice, you have to get organized. He built a community from scratch in a time that was actively trying to tear it down.
So, who was this guy who ended up starting a whole global movement? Well, long before the Masons, there was the man. Okay, so his early life is a little bit of a mystery, but we know he was born around 1735, and by the 1770s, he was already an established figure in Boston. He was a free man, he was literate, which was a big deal, he owned property, he paid his taxes, and he was a skilled leather worker. Get this, he even sold drumheads to the Continental Army. So he was already a respected leader in Boston's free Black community right when all that revolutionary energy was starting to bubble up. Now, Hall saw all the talk about liberty, equality, and brotherhood, and he wanted to make it a reality for Black men who were being completely left out of the conversation. And his way in? The very secretive, very influential world of Freemasonry. What drew Hall and 14 other free Black men to the Masons was that their core principles sounded a lot like the Declaration of Independence. They heard the words liberty and equality, and they believed in them. So they did the logical thing. They applied to join Boston's all-white St. John's Lodge. They wanted a seat at the table. So here's the big question. In a city that was the beating heart of the fight for freedom, would that same freedom be offered to these men? Well, the answer from the American lodges was a hard no. They were rejected, turned away by the very same guys who are out in the streets shouting about liberty and tyranny. But Prince Hall was not the kind of guy who gave up. And what he did next is one of the great ironies of American history. He and his brothers turned to the enemy, the British. On March 6, 1775, just before the Revolution kicked off, they were initiated as Masons by a British military lodge that was stationed in Boston. Now, when the British Army left, they had permission to meet as a lodge, but they couldn't really do much else. So Hall did something incredibly bold. He went right over the heads of all the American lodges and petitioned the Grand Lodge of England itself for an official charter. And it worked. After the war was over, on September 29, 1784, that charter finally arrived from London. It officially created African Lodge number 459, the very first of its kind in the United States. And that original document, their proof that they were legitimate, is still carefully preserved today by the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Massachusetts. It's incredible. But, getting that piece of paper was really just the beginning. For Prince Hall, this lodge was never, ever going to be just some social club. No, this was going to be an engine for real change. Let that sink in for a minute. This wasn't just the first Black Masonic lodge. This was the first formal, public-facing organization founded and run by people of African descent in all of North America. It came before the AME Church. It became the central hub, the organizational backbone for Black advocacy for years to come. And they did not waste any time. You can see right here, their focus wasn't just on secret handshakes, it was on civil rights. In 1777, they're petitioning to abolish slavery. A decade later, in 87, they're demanding public schools for their kids, arguing, hey, we pay taxes too. And then in 88, they're protesting the horrifying practice of kidnapping free Black men and selling them back into slavery. This was strategic, organized activism. And if you want to know what they were up against, just listen to Prince Hall's own words from a speech in 1797. He talks about needing incredible patience just to deal with the daily insults they faced on the streets of Boston, saying they basically had to carry their lives in their hands every single day. This wasn't some abstract fight for them. It was about basic dignity and survival. Now, after Hall passed away in 1807, the movement he started just exploded, spreading far beyond Boston. But with all that growth came new challenges and, well, a pretty complicated legacy that we're still seeing today. The organization kept evolving. In 1827, they took a page out of the American Revolution's playbook and declared their independence from the Grand Lodge of England. And then, in 1847, they did something really fitting.
They officially renamed themselves the Prince Hall Grand Lodge. His name literally became their banner.
Okay, so to understand the modern situation, we need to talk about a key Masonic idea called regularity. The easiest way to think about it is like diplomatic relations between countries. It's the system where Grand Lodges officially recognize each other as legitimate. If you have regularity, you can visit each other's meetings, and you're part of the mainstream. If you don't, you're on the outside, looking in. And that idea of regularity is at the heart of a modern split. On one side, you have Prince Hall affiliated, or PHA, Masonry. It's set up just like mainstream Masonry, with an independent Grand Lodge for each state, and it is widely recognized as regular. On the other side, you've got Prince Hall Origin, or PHO. This group came from an attempt back in the 19th century to create a single national Grand Lodge for everyone. Today, this group is not considered regular by PHA or the mainstream Grand Lodges. It's a really complex history, all about different ideas of how to govern and what makes you legitimate. So after all that, let's bring it all home. What's the real takeaway here? Why does this 18th century leather worker from Boston still matter so much? Well, for one, his legacy lives on through the absolute giants it produced. The fraternity he founded became a training ground for some of the most important people in American history. I'm talking about Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, the one and only Duke Ellington, and the civil rights icon, Congressman John Lewis. They all walked a path that Prince Hall first paved. And that work is still going on. The Prince Hall Memorial Education and Scholarship Fund has a mission of building bridges to a better tomorrow. That's a direct continuation of Hall's original fight for education and community uplift. It's a living, breathing testament to what he started. Which brings us to one last big question. We've seen that Prince Hall was a leader during the Revolution, an early abolitionist, a fighter for civil rights, and the founder of one of America's oldest and most important Black institutions. So if he helped write the very story of the fight for equality in America, why isn't his name as famous as Paul Revere or John Hancock? That is something worth thinking about.